Let's create our label by selecting our rectangle tool in the 2D window and clicking on the workspace. We'll make our label the standard, 2 width and 1 for height. From there, let's grab a fabric to develop it in by going into our library. We'll do the Duchess satin since that is the closest I can find here to the standard fabric for labels. Before we go forward, I'm going to make a few adjustments in the property editor. First, we'll change the type of fabric to shiny. Then we can scroll down to physical properties and change the preset to leather lambskin. That will help stiffen our fabric without adding interfacing. You can drag it from your object browser and onto your rectangle. Since it's a small piece, I'm also going to bring the particle distance down to 2. Okay, time to bring in our graphic. Let's select the Add Graphic tool, and I'm going to bring in my standard DFI logo. Once we find our center point on the pattern, we can click on our workspace and the dimension box will come up. For now, we can make it 1.5 by 1.5. But to change that, simply select your Edit Graphic tool and select your graphic. A compass will appear and you can enlarge your graphic by dragging any of the arrows in the direction you'd like it to grow. Once you have it centered and in the right size, you can switch to your polygon tool. We're going to create our stitching by tracing your letters or logo. Once we have the more difficult shapes traced, we can switch to the rectangle tool and take a quick shortcut in this process. When you're done, you can delete the graphic in your object browser. Now we're ready to top stitch. We'll start by creating a new stitch in our object browser. Since we don't have one yet, we'll call it single needle. Now let's head into the property editor and adjust a few settings. First, we'll change the offset to 0. We'll bring up the thread length, or SPI, to 18. And we'll thicken the thread to 80. It's probably also a good idea to change the type to shiny, and finally, we can change the color to something that will contrast our label fabric. Also, I'm going to change the face under configuration from front to both. It's just something I prefer to do in case anything gets flipped later on. Okay, now we can top stitch by clicking on the lines we just created until everything is filled. When you're done, we can work on placing your label on your shirt. Start by selecting your back piece, opening your options menu, and selecting Remove Linked Editing. By doing this, you're preventing duplicate stitching when you attach your label to your shirt. From there, you can select your label again. Select Clone as Internal Shape in order to create a duplicate shape to align your placement. Center it a couple of inches down from your back neckline. To make sure we're placing it on the interior of our t-shirt, I'm going to select the fabric in the object browser and move down to the property editor to switch from front to back using this tab under the material menu. Scroll down to color, and again, just to be sure, I'm going to change that to a darker gray. Great. Here's how you switch the face of your pattern piece if you need to. Just go up to your fabric display menu in the 2D window and select that second to last icon. That will flip it over. Let's grab our segment sewing tool now to stitch the label into our shirt. One thing to keep in mind when you flip the face of your fabric is that your stitch lines might flip as well. So you'll want to monitor that things aren't crossing in the 3D window as you stitch. Once you have those stitch lines, you can select your label in 3D and superimpose over. Then simulate. If everything looks good in the back and everything looks good with the placement of your label, you can stop the simulation and change your interior color back to the original white in your property editor. And that is basically it. You now have a beautiful label that you can place on all your digital garments.